Adi Varma was born in a quiet village nestled at the edge of the Himalayan foothills in northern India. From a young age, he showed signs of brilliance that both astounded and baffled those around him. 3. He could solve puzzles meant for 10-year-olds. By 5, he was correcting the village schoolteacher's arithmetic. And by 7, he had built a small device using discarded wires and batteries that could light up a broken lamp. His parents were humble farmers, barely scraping by. They didn't understand where Adi's gifts came from, but they knew one thing. He was meant for something more. With great difficulty, they managed to send him to a better school in the nearby town, where his light began to shine even brighter. There Adi devoured books, math, science, philosophy, literature. He wasn't just good with numbers. He was curious about everything. He asked questions others didn't dare to, and he answered ones teachers couldn't. By the time he was 14, he had built a prototype for a water purification device that won him a national science competition and caught the attention of the media. Soon scholarships started rolling in. A prestigious university in Delhi offered him a full ride. Then came invitations from abroad: MIT, Stanford, Oxford. He chose MIT not just for the prestige but because they promised him freedom to explore his own ideas. MIT, he was a sensation. By 20, he had co-authored breakthrough papers in AI and sustainable energy. By 22, he had launched a startup that used machine learning to predict and prevent crop failures, a tool that would go on to help thousands of farmers in developing countries, including his own parents back home. But despite the success, Adi felt an emptiness. He had chased knowledge and achievement all his life, yet something essential was missing. In all the labs and conference rooms, among awards and flashing cameras, he felt disconnected. From himself, from others, from meaning. That's when he met Noor. She was not a scientist. She studied philosophy and worked part-time at the university library. She had a quiet strength and a way of listening that made Adi feel like he wasn't being studied for the first time, but seen. They began talking first about books, then about life. She challenged him not with equations but with questions. Asterisk, what are you really building? Why does it matter? Asterisk. Slowly, something shifted in Adi. He started attending her philosophy seminars, reading Plato and Rumi alongside technical journals. With Noor's influence, he began to think not just about what he could do, but what he should do. Together, they visited rural schools, spoke to farmers, and worked on grassroots technology projects that directly impacted lives. At 26, Adi turned down a $1 billion acquisition offer for his company. Instead, he restructured it into a non-profit foundation focused on ethical technology for marginalized communities. Critics called him idealistic, but Adi for the first time felt whole. Years later, standing under the same starlit sky he grew up beneath, Adi told a group of village children, "Your intelligence is a gift. But the real question is, who will you serve with it?" He had achieved more than most people dream of: wealth, fame, innovation. But in the end, it wasn't his inventions that defined him. It was his journey from brilliance to wisdom, from isolation to love, from success to significance. And beside him stood Noor, the one who had helped him find what his mind alone could not: purpose. Adi's foundation, Sarti Tech, grew rapidly, not in size but in reach. Its mission was clear: build accessible, ethical technology that uplifts the invisible majority. He and Noor traveled across the globe, speaking at UN summits and working with local innovators in Kenya, Brazil, Indonesia, and rural India. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it fed something deep inside him. But brilliance, especially when wielded boldly, never goes unnoticed for long. One rainy afternoon in Bengaluru, as Adi prepared to address a group of policymakers on AI transparency, he received an urgent encrypted message. It was from Riya Kulkarni, an old friend and cybersecurity expert who now worked in international digital rights advocacy. "We need to talk. Someone is using parts of your old code. Quietly. It's not good." The code she referred to was from a machine learning algorithm Adi had developed years ago, back when he was still chasing prestige. It was meant to predict behavioral patterns, originally designed for humanitarian use. Optimizing medical supplies in disaster zones, forecasting migration patterns to improve aid delivery. But it had another potential use: surveillance. Ria had traced a forked version of Audi's algorithm being integrated into a military-grade surveillance system used by an authoritarian government overseas. The chilling part: the AI was being used to preemptively identify high-risk individuals, based on online behavior, facial expressions, even social interactions. Audi was stunned. He had open-sourced parts of that code under a Creative Commons license, never imagining it could be turned into a tool for oppression. The next few weeks were a blur. Noor urged him to stay grounded, but Audi was torn between moral outrage and responsibility. Was he to blame for how others used his ideas? Was brilliance, unaccompanied by control, dangerous? Rather than retreat, Audi chose to act. He launched Project Deep Light, a transparency initiative combining AI forensics and international policy advocacy. He and Ria assembled a team of ethical hackers, legal scholars, and former whistleblowers. Their goal: trace, expose, and legally challenge unethical uses of technology derived from open-source intelligence. It was bold. It was risky. Made enemies. One night, while walking back from a university lecture in Tokyo, Audi was nearly hit by a car. He chalked it up to coincidence, until Ria's office in Geneva was broken into. Then their servers were breached. Anonymous threats started to appear. Noor, ever his compass, took his hand and said, "Brilliance gives you reach. Courage gives you direction." Audi knew then that his journey was no longer just about helping the poor or building tools. It was about guarding the soul of innovation itself. At 38, Audi was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Not for a single invention, but for building a global framework on responsible intelligence that changed how governments and companies thought about data, power, and ethics. But by then, he had withdrawn from the public eye. He and Noor had moved to a small house near the foothills, where it all began. He taught at a modest school, wrote essays, tended a rooftop garden, and mentored young minds online through an anonymous avatar named Sarti42. People still spoke his name in tech circles, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with controversy. But to those who knew him well, Audi was never about the noise. He was the boy who dreamed big, the man who stood tall, and the thinker who stayed human. And every night, under stars that had watched him rise, fall, and rise again, he would whisper to the sky, "Knowledge is light, but love, that is the flame." 10 years after Adi Varma passed away quietly in his sleep, a marble plaque was placed at the entrance of a modest learning center in Uttarakhand. It read, "To the boy who taught us that intellect without empathy is a fire without warmth. In memory of Adi Varma, 1987 to 2057. The center wasn't named after him. He had left strict instructions in his will. No statues. No slogans. Just keep teaching. It was simply called Sarti Learning Hub, a place where orphans, village children, and first-generation learners came not only to study but to question, build, and dream. But his name had spread far beyond classrooms. His framework for ethical AI, once considered idealistic, had been adopted as international policy across dozens of countries. His startup-turned-foundation had trained over 100,000 grassroots technologists worldwide. And his anonymous online mentorship as Sarti42 had sparked a quiet revolution among students, many of whom never knew the real name behind the screen, until after he was gone. Noor, now gray-haired but luminous as ever, still taught philosophy and ran the foundation. She would often be seen sitting beneath the banyan tree in the school courtyard, reading from the same dog-eared copy of the Prophet that Adi once carried in his backpack. Each year on his birthday, students from all over would gather to share projects inspired by Adi's ideas: low-cost prosthetics, climate monitoring drones, solar-powered irrigation systems. They never made it a competition. Noor insisted, "We're not here to prove we're the smartest. We're here to prove we care." One rainy evening, a young girl named Kavya, barely 13, walked up to Noor after a talk. She was bright, intense, and fiercely curious, reminding everyone of someone they'd once known. Was he ever scared? Kavya asked softly. Noor looked out at the wet hills shimmering under the moonlight. All the time, she said. But he never let fear decide who he would be. Kavya nodded, then walked away, already lost in thought, already dreaming. And so, the story of Audie Varma never truly ended. It lived on in algorithms coded with conscience, in inventions born from compassion, and in children who believed that brilliance was not a gift to hoard, but a torch to pass on. Because some minds change the world, and some hearts teach it how.